Hello there, good to see you. So, this you could say is an emergency reading. Alright? So, I woke up on top of everything else, and what's happened? Turns out Donald Trump Jr. met with the deputy head of the Russian Central Bank, Alexander Torshin, at the NRA conference in 2016. I'll just give you a moment to absorb that. So I've included on a previous video, but I'll put on this one again, a quote from Junior in 2008 to a real estate conference, bragging about the Russian money they have. Pouring in was the phrase, pouring in. So in and of itself, that wasn't illegal. Businessmen run around the world funding each other's projects all the time. But it is illegal, love. It is illegal when your dad's going for president and you're a senior member of the campaign. Then it becomes very dodgy and, in fact, moves into the illegal. And what's been talked about is outright flagrant money laundering on a large scale generally. But with this, what's been talked about is this is a direct connection in the flesh between Torshin, Trump Jr. and $30 million that then went through the NRA, laundered and came out to the Trump campaign. The NRA, the National Rifle Association. These are the most conservative dudes on the face of the earth, you know. And traditionally they would have been so anti-Russian, you know. It's gobsmacking that their love of Trump meant they would be party to this. It's strange. So, had to do this reading on Trump Jr., Russia, and the NRA. Go more. So, Trump Jr., Russia, and the National Rifle Association. I can't believe it. Trump Jr., Russia, the NRA. Trump Jr., Russia, the NRA. Trump Jr., Russia, and the NRA. Okay. So I'm going to do quite a basic layout here, which I shall show you. It's a 7-card reading, and we'll see if we need more. So, alright, this is the first video I've done at night, so the lighting might be weird. Okay, the head card, the main card. You're becoming good at tarot too. I'm sure you'll go, oh, there it is again. The King of Wands. And as I've described, normally a figure of responsibility and largesse, unless it's reversed or in the context of a negative reading, in which case it's not only someone of inflated ideas, but vastly inflated ideas of themselves and what they can accomplish. So this early on, hard to say whether it's Junior or the father, but we do know generally from other readings and from, by readings, sorry, I don't mean tarot readings, I mean investigative journalism. It's not hard to understand that he, as the son, was desperate to impress his father, and so he took it on himself to really charge forward with the Russian stuff. So how did that go for you, Donald? Well, yes, here we have the Pentacles card, money, someone working for Trump, in this case obviously his son, but it could also be reflecting the Russians and money and working for Trump. This figure has the falcon here. I'm a bit iffy whether it's Junior or the Russians. I'm leaning a bit more towards the Russian figures, and it's becoming more apparent at the Russian interference, not only in the hacking, but in terms of this money. And if you look halfway down this card, it has a hedge, and there are things always hidden behind the hedge. Now, like all the tarot cards, it's not normally just a negative card. It has many positive connotations, and so I'm sure in the early days it all went swimmingly. I'm sure they had a really good time. I think Donald Trump Jr. is hugely impressed by the Russians and the Russian wealth. So because he was mixing with the 1%, you've got to remember Russian big money, the oligarch money, is like the Saudi money. It's mind-bendingly huge compared with even the Trump money. So he would have been very impressed by that. He's young, not young enough to be able to get away with this, but if, like I said, in 2008 he was already talking up the Russians, and that's 10 years ago, and then he'd already been on half a dozen trips to Russia and famously said he'd like to live in Moscow. That's very unusual for an American. So we have the Chariot sweeping forth, and we have the Fool. It's a perfect storm. So coming up here, these last three, which I will describe in a moment, I think we're talking about sealing the fate of Donald Jr. Like, lest we forget, his brother, Frodo, Eric, also skited of the Russian money, but no one bothers much with Eric. So it's Donald Jr. who's going to be wearing this at the end. And he's got the Judgment card. He's got the world looking on, and it's also a global phenomenon, because this money laundering, we're all grown-ups here, all the viewers of this channel. I understand that you have a sophisticated understanding of how this works. So the world means not only were they transferring money around the world, not only that the world is watching, but it's now a time when the world wants to see judgment, and the world wants to see, ta-da, justice. So for Donald Trump Jr., this isn't looking good. Okay. But what about the NRA? Strength. Undoubtedly, they're one of the strongest organizations in America. They have this irrational hold on the American psyche. And even with 8 years of Obama, or you could have 25 years of Democrats, it's still going to be really hard to rock that position that the NRA holds. I mean, this is powerful men who support and fund the NRA. It's also the Hokies whose lives are really quite miserable in other ways. They can't afford health care. Many people they know are probably affected by the opioid crisis, if not themselves. They've got no future. Their house is going to be foreclosed. But you know what? I've got the Second Amendment. So guns, guns, guns. Strong. Strength. Massively strong. But conflict. They're going to have conflict over this issue, because I don't think the rank and file, the Hokie from, you know, the back blocks, the rank and file, and even a lot of more reasonable people who support the whole arms thing for their own reasons. I don't think they had any idea that the Trump campaign was getting funneled money directly from the Central Bank of Russia. The Central Bank of Russia is Putin's bank. It's not an independent banking system. It is Putin. So Putin essentially put $30 million and the rest, when we look at the condominiums and everything else, just in this series of transactions through. I don't think the NRA had any idea. And I think these are, like I was saying before, I think a lot of the, I'm calling them guys, there's a lot of women with guns in their handbags and they're the ones getting shot by the toddlers in the supermarket. Let's not go there. I think they might be a little bit shocked to find their organisation was complicit in a blatantly treasonous and illegal act. Ooh. The Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is spinning. It's the card of karma. It's the card of destiny. And I don't think they're going to be able to outrun this. It could be one of the few things that will shake the NRA. I don't think it's going to dismantle itself or anything, but it's going to have conflict within itself. This is the recurring pointless conflict, right? This isn't winners and losers. This is rubbish conflict. It's internal to them. That's going to throw a lot of people, and they can't escape it. Very interesting. Now, I'm sure the viewers of this channel will be aware too that the vast majority of shootings in America, and the scale of the shooting is inconceivable to those of us who live in other countries, it's over 11,000 people a year shot. And of those, the vast majority, like with the exception of a very few number, are shot by other Americans. They're not shot in vast numbers by terrorist rampages. Hideous things happen, like the Orlando nightclub shooting that was a hate crime and so forth, but often connected to domestic violence and just too many guns on the street. Canada's interesting because it's just next door. It's also a hunting culture, and yet they don't have these sort of figures. So more Americans get killed by Americans every year. So more people are killed by guns than in Lebanon. You know, it's staggering. So the gun culture is central to this, and in Trumpland, the gun culture is central. So it's a matter of pride and power when your life is out of control or nothing much to look forward to, the power of the gun. So the NRA will be facing some repercussions from this, and it'll be very interesting. Now, before I go, I want to backtrack a bit on Lindsey Graham. So I was a bit down on Lindsey Graham in a recent reading, and the only reason I was down was because prior to that he'd been someone who had a brain and a principle, and then he seemed to go all weird and sort of wishy-washy on Trump, and I found that disappointing, and my revenge was to do a reading. But since then, he's come back. I think he genuinely has principles, and I think the people who gave him principles in his life, his family and so forth, and community and so forth, have actually got back in his other ear, and he's come out and said there needn't have been a government shutdown. The DACA legislation could have gone ahead at 10 o'clock in the morning. They had a deal, and at 12 o'clock noon, 2 hours later, the deal was off the table, and he was shocked. And so good on him for speaking up. So Lindsey Graham's now back in my good books. Thank you, Lindsey. All right, got lots of other things I need to be getting on with too, including the stock market. I'm itching to do the stock market. So I'll do that next. Bye.